Okay, I think we're going to get cracking. We are still expecting a few more people, but I think people will drop in as and when they can, because I know some people are working this afternoon as well, so we're kind of just dropping in and listening. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this afternoon's webinar. This is a webinar for reps, and it is for reps to share their experiences, to talk about any issues they've got, share their opinions, ask any questions. And we've also got a number of NUJ officials. Thank you very much for joining us, because I know how busy you all are dealing with all the issues that members are bringing to you, who will also be speaking this afternoon as well on the webinar. Now, the theme for today is preparing in advance for future job losses. I think, as Nick has said, I think it's hit a nerve for many people, because sadly this is becoming a huge issue for members in right across the different NUJ sectors. So this may be the first of a number of different webinars that we run specifically around this topic, because I think this is a topic that people need more information about in order to be able to address it. So just to introduce myself, my name is Caroline Holmes. I'm the Programme Coordinator for the NUJ National Reps Trade Union Training Programme. Some of you I know, and it's lovely to see you here. Some of you I don't know, welcome. These are a series of webinars that we hold every 2 weeks. You will be receiving invitations to these from now on, but you will also see invitations going out on NUJ Active. So every NUJ Active bulletin, please do check it, because it does give details of up and coming webinars, the dates, and also all the NUJ trade union training courses that we have now put online, which I will come back to at the end. So just to talk about how things are going to run today, this meeting will last no longer than 2:30. So we've got until now until 2:30 to run the meeting. How this is going to work is that an official, and I've got a list of officials who've agreed to join us today because they're able to. They're going to speak. They're going to do just a 5-minute briefing really around this particular topic. Then I'm going to open it up to all of you if you want to ask a question, if you want to make a comment. So for the duration of the meeting, if I can ask you to keep muted, but I will ask you to unmute and do ask your question, share your experience when we get to opening it up to the floor. So I want to encourage you to share any opinions that you have, questions that you have. This is your opportunity to address some of the issues that you're having to deal with. The chat facility on the right hand side of the screen, I'm sure those of you, for many of you now, you're very familiar with using Zoom. The chat button is at the bottom, the very bottom bar of your screen. You just click on chat and this little white box will come up to the right of your screen at the bottom there. If you want to introduce yourselves there, it would be really good to hear who you are, where you work. If you have any questions you want specifically addressing, if you'd like to start your question with a capital Q and then ask your question, I'll keep a note of that question so that when we get to that point, I'll hand it over to you to ask the question. So please do ask away. That's what you're here for. Excuse me, I'm sorry, slightly distracted because I am still bringing people in as well, so apologies. This session is aimed at all members and reps who are supporting members in dealing with any of these issues that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. Whether you're in a chapel or whether you're in a branch, it's relevant for you. Each official, as I say, is going to be asked to speak for 5 minutes. Please be mindful of the NUJ rules on conduct, that no one will say anything that is offensive or discriminatory. So please bear in mind, this is being recorded. So please also bear in mind, you will be able to watch this afterwards, and other reps and members will be able to watch this afterwards as well. So please bear in mind that if you don't want to have your camera on, that's absolutely fine. Also think about, if you're talking about anything specific, try and remember not to mention any specific names. Think about confidentiality and all those other issues, because as I say, it is going to be recorded. It will be sat on the membership section of the NUJ website, so it's not going to be open for everybody to be able to watch, i.e. the public, but please do bear that in mind because it is being recorded. Some of you have already asked questions and you've sent them to me. I have directed those to the officials and they will answer them at the various points throughout the meeting. So if I could just ask the first official to start their briefing, unless anybody's got any questions before we start. Okay, if you do have any questions, if you want to use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen, please do, or just indicate to me if you've got your video on just by waving like that, because I'll be keeping an eye out for everybody. So if I could ask, I think it was Fiona who's the first person to speak this afternoon. Fiona, would you like to do a 5-minute briefing, please?
Hiya. For those who don't know me, I'm Fiona Swarbrick. I'm the national organiser for magazines, books and PR at the NUJ. Now, there's a few of us talking to you today, and so you're going to get a bit of a deluge of information, I think. But what I thought I would just address in my 5 minutes is some things that you can do now. This goes whether you're in a recognised chapel or not. And all of it will be good preparation, whether or not redundancy might be happening in the future for your chapel. All of these things are going to stand you in good stead as preparation, so they're never going to be a waste of time. So I kind of see these as sort of, it's kind of unsexy admin, so you're not going to thank me. But it is, it is stuff that is going to benefit your members when it comes to actually making, sort of positive impact at the relevant point when the difficulties arise, when redundancies arise. So the first thing that I'd advise all reps to do is to take this opportunity to make sure your membership lists are up to date. And that's really important, because if people are going to lose jobs, you're going to need to know whether they're members, you're going to need to know where your members are, where the job losses are in relation to that. So you're going to need to have a clear picture. This is called, some of you might have done a bit of this. If you've done any reps training, it's called mapping. And the first part is to speak to an NUJ official about, an NUJ admin, a member of admin staff, about a membership list for your chapel, and to go through that and to update it and make sure that it's updated in good condition as possible. Once you've done that, what you really want to be doing is looking at the areas in which we might be quite weak for levels of membership. And obviously those areas are then potentially a bit more vulnerable to redundancies happening in them if management are aware that, that it's less organised. So pay some attention to those areas, at least identify them, and preferably, if you can, approach people in those areas and try and reach out and make contact and see if they are interested in joining, or at least being a contact, so that we're able to get information out of all areas of the business, so that we're able to help members when the time comes. And I think, as well as, obvious need to be as strong as possible I think we just need to be set in place sort of communication that we might need, so that it's there if we need it in a hurry. So if there's a sudden redundancy announcement, you're not going, oh my God, I haven't got all of my chapel members' any email addresses, so I can invite them to a meeting to discuss this. And make sure that's in place and use it. Have a Zoom chapel meeting if you haven't yet since lockdown, and use that opportunity to get volunteers on board. Talk straight to members and let them know there's going to be some tough times ahead, I think, for probably all chapels in some way. So, level with them about that. They're involved with that. Ask for people to volunteer, so you do have people in all areas that can ferry information back and forth, that can help you, because any of you who've been involved with repping and redundancies knows that it's hard work, and you'll get really busy and it'll happen really fast. So as many people as possible as can help you right now, you need to be encouraging that and getting them in place. And also, I think just speaking to the members in an honest way about what their role will be. I think sometimes we find, especially where there's collective redundancies, and this is really difficult in recognised chapels, but super difficult in unrecognised chapels, where you may end up just being an elected employee rep or something like that. What we find is that obviously part of the consultation process is the potential for raising alternative proposals with management that might prevent redundancies or reduce redundancies. If you're going to be able to do that, you need people in the department affected. So quite often members in departments where there's redundancies will say to the rep, oh, we want to submit an alternative proposal, yeah, could you write that for us? And obviously that doesn't work, because that the rep or your official or anybody else doesn't really have that level of detail. So it's about sort of making sure that they're gathering their own data at the moment, you know, being across how their department works right now, what sort of hours them and their colleagues are doing, how the work is organised, so that they're in a position to understand proposals if they come forward and respond to them. And this is something that's going to have to be sort of active amongst your members, and you can't do it for them. So I think preparing them for that, and for the fact that, you know, they're going to need to be engaging with you and feeding information back to you as well. And it's going to be a two-way process. I think it's good to get just the ground rules in now, so you're not scrabbling around and everybody's expecting you to come in and wave a magic wand and save their jobs. And you know, and part of that is them being involved with recruitment too, quite honestly. I think it would be a good idea at that point to talk to them about whether their colleagues are members and whether they've asked them about union membership, and just all the things that you might want to do if you just had a little bit of time. Yeah, think of your last redundancy exercise or whatever. If you'd had a couple of months, even a couple of weeks, even to prepare for that. That's what we've got now, because, you know, I don't think there's going to be many workplaces that remain untouched in this. I really don't. So we can predict this, and we do have that opportunity. So I think do yourself a favour. You know, reach out to people now. Reach out to, you know, people like me, other people who can, you know, can help you, but might need a little bit of a lead-in time to help you. And to your members, reach out now, and then you can avoid burning out later on when the work really might be coming thick and fast. But it's never too late to put these things in place. You know, even if you've got notices of redundancies now, you can do this work now, and it will make a difference. But it's just much better if you can avoid burning yourself out at the crucial point. I think that's sort of all I had to say really on that. That's the advice that I've been giving my chapels. So I've been talking to about this stuff, and the redundancies are starting to come in. So I think now's the time to prepare.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, Fiona. I think that's a really important point, particularly around being proactive, not waiting until these the notices necessarily come in, or that actually the employers are asking for some kind of reaction. The more proactive we can be, the more organised we can be, the more that we actually come at it from an informed position. And that's how we can help our members in the best possible way. We've done our homework, we've done our research, we've got ourselves prepared. And that will mean that we're not on the back foot, we're actually on the front foot, and we can ask all those challenging questions, those searching questions, and get the best possible outcome. So thank you ever so much for that, Fiona. Some really important points you've made there. I should have said at the beginning that all the points that are made throughout this webinar will be summarised, and a sheet will go out of the summary at the end, which will be sent out to everybody. So if you don't manage to get it all down, I will do my best to try and summarise it all. Nick, would you like to go next, please?
Very happy to. Fiona's points are excellent, and in the Scottish office where I'm based, it very much chimes with our thinking at the moment. There are very few things that we've been able to predict through this, but the withdrawal of the furlough scheme is clearly going to be a point where employers are seriously thinking about the future and the economics of that. I've been doing a lot of lobbying with the Holyrood Parliament, and one thing I've said is that this has kind of accelerated in the print industry to, you know, maybe in a few months to where we would have been going to be a lot of boardrooms who are going to be making extremely hard decisions about their business going forward. Now, the one thing I have to stress is that at this point, I don't have any special knowledge, but this is simply based on the people we work with, what they do in the best of times, and recognizing that isn't the best of times. To go back a bit, before as an official, I was a freelance and I was an activist. One of the industrial disputes I was involved with was, crikey, 20 years ago now, at the Scotsman Group. I've always described that as a sort of particular product for a particular time, because we had a dozen photographers, all of whom knew each other. trusted each other, spent a lot of time with each other, who stuck together through what was eventually 4 years. And the reason I say that was a product of its time. That was in 1999. If it had been a few years later, it would have been a completely different thing to try and organise. In 1999, we were all going in the building to process films. We'd sit there in a photographer's room. We'd know each other. We had that physical contact. A few years later, we'd all be sitting with laptops in ours and probably not seeing the colleagues, you know, for weeks on end. We're in that situation now where all of the things that we have depended upon with the production of journalism to how we work every day has been disrupted, and with that as disrupting the small minutiae of how we run a chapel, and how we organise, how we talk to our colleagues, and how we organise action together and give people the confidence in the union, and how we do that when we don't have the ability to walk over to someone's desk. It's going to be extremely disruptive. It's also going to come at a time when people are naturally under a huge amount of stress. They're going to be at home. There is a background level of stress from wives, kids, you know, people working with laptops in knees or on the edge of beds or whatever, and people are isolated from their workplace. In one particular case, we have one newspaper in Scotland at the moment that literally has moved out of its office and has nowhere to go to. So while we're expecting them to take on another office, those people are in office at the moment. Similarly, JPI has just announced the potential for two office closures in the south of Scotland as well, which again, it disrupts people's identity, the connection with the workplace and the connection with the colleagues going forward. The thing that we rely on very much is our membership database and our chapel list, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to get those up to date. I've had to work through, you know, sort of potential industrial action at Reach and NewsQuest and JPI, where we've had to sit down and make sure the chapel lists are up to date, and it's a job in itself. I tend to teach, I tend to treat anything that comes off the membership database a bit like you treat an ordnance survey map from 1841. It probably has some relationship to what you're going to see in front of you, but things may have moved around in the meantime. We have had places in chapels where we've had people who have quite genuinely not known they're a member of the union. I believe there have been cases where people have held office while not actually knowing that they're members of the union. So the importance of actually going through it, making sure we have the work email, the home email, and make sure that that's accessible, not just to chapel reps, to the officials, and that everyone knows where everyone is and where people are. And with that, where do people need to be recruited? I'm an extremely strong believer there's no atheists in foxholes, and there's no one who's skeptical about the power of a union when they're facing a redundancy situation. If people are going to join the union and they've put it off and ummed and ahed, if they don't join now, they never will. And this is the point that we ask the question. We need to keep communication. We need to keep those lines of communication open, because when people are facing their job, that is a big thing to address in the first email. It's the same thing with any kind of personal relationship. If you can bring up a conversation about the weather, it makes it easier to bring up a conversation about sort of bigger things further down the line. So you have that. Make sure there's always an email somewhere relatively recently where every member of the chapel knows they can reply to and speak to a rep or speak to an official or whatever. And it's important to say, and this is something that I found with talking to members, sometimes there were issues I was working on as an official and you're actually not making progress, and actually you think there's nothing to report, but actually the fact the union is doing something, continuing to work about something, saying this is an issue I know, we haven't got anywhere yet, but we're still working at it. It cements in people's mind that the union is there and working for them in the background, because it's silence in these situations. When people are out the workplace, when people are separated from their work colleagues, they can't immediately look up and see a chapel rep. It's there where sort of doubts and insecurities and so on keep in. So any kind of regular communication that let members know you're there is fundamentally important. One issue that we've come across, and this needs to be stressed over and over again, is
just 1 minute,
of
please.
furlough, and there are a lot of people who, fantastic, I'll be fast. There are a lot of people who've been put on furlough who think that that is a direct line to redundancy. It simply isn't. You can completely understand the situation of people being told that they're not needed in the workplace and the assumptions it drawn, but the redundancy process has to be entirely separate from that. And we've already encountered today one employer in Scotland who they themselves have crossed the line and don't seem to be able to grasp that. Know your house agreement, know the procedures the company's going to be working for, and also remember, if there's the vaguest chance that you're going to push for industrial action, the time limits are quite lengthy on that. We need to have an indicative ballot, and we need to, before we push for an actual ballot. So if that is a possibility at any time, start talking to your officials at the earliest possible opportunity in case the redundancy process starts, but we haven't completed all the stages of potential strike action before that. I think that's everything, and I hope that's 5 minutes.
That's perfect, Nick. Thank you so much. And you've raised some really, again, some really important points here. I think the point around keeping members informed on a regular basis is really important. Feedback that I'm getting from members and reps is how important it is for them to have that regular contact, to know what's going on. And some chapels and branches are putting out bulletins. So regular bulletins might be quite useful. So think about different ways that you can do it that's easy, that's not too much, not too burdensome for you, and not too onerous for you as well as reps, but it is so important. Can I now, we've heard from 2 officials so far, can I now just open it up to the floor and see, does anybody, would anybody like to make a comment? Anybody like to ask a question, share something that they, perhaps an experience that they've got? Can't see anybody's hand up or anybody indicating. If you do at any point want to say something, please do indicate. You're very welcome to just dip in as we're going through. There will be plenty of opportunities at the end to ask questions as well, but you're very welcome to as we're going through as well. So, okay, I don't think there's anybody unless there's anything in chat.
Paul's indicating.
So is that Paul Breeden?
Paul Breeden's indicating.
Sorry. My screen had moved and I didn't see you, Paul. Please go ahead, Paul.
No worries, no worries. I was just looking for the hand raise function. I couldn't find it. Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on what Nick said and ask you, Nick. There's an awful lot of questions a lot of us have got about how the furlough scheme is meant to work when employers want to start redundancies. What's the incident you're talking about where an employer about it?
It's an issue that's come up this morning, and I'm reluctant to go into too much detail. I mean, the essential thing is that a redundancy process should be, separate from any, furlough isn't a shortcut to it. It shouldn't count on it. On the big recognised workplaces that we work with, JPI, Reach, NewsQuest, we have the set matrix, we have the redundancy pool, we have the ability to challenge that at every stage. What members are worried about, and particularly when they are put on furlough, is that this is a precursor, that this is a sign of something, and it's completely rational to have those concerns. It is. We have a workplace where I deal with where someone entered into furlough thinking it was going to be a fair rotation, and found that some employees were ring-fenced and others weren't, and obviously the instinct of that member was to think that this is a two-tier thing. Where issues arise, it very much depends on the facts of the case, so it's worth raising with the relevant official and then whoever you keep contact with in the first instance. Of laying down some kind of paper trail at the earliest thing in case this comes up later down the redundancy process. But it will turn on its own facts for that.
Okay, well, thanks, Nick. I mean, what's concerning me, and I know several of the other reps at the moment, is that we are seeing employers proposing redundancies while people are on furlough. And some of us have tried to find a scheme, and helpfully a government minister, the aviation minister, answered a question in Parliament last Wednesday, in which she said she criticised heavily the companies in the aviation industry, the airlines, which are laying people off while still claiming furlough, and that's great. And some of us have been trying to find out from HMRC and the Treasury without success whether that reflects government policy in any way. Because clearly, it would be good to say to employers, you're not supposed to be doing this. Either you're not supposed to be proposing redundancies until you've exhausted your ability to furlough people, or another question, can employers use furlough payments to fund notice pay, which I think several of us, when we first heard the idea, thought would be out of the question, but it's clearly not. Employers are proposing to do this, and again, we can't get a straight answer from anyone in government yet. It strikes me the quickest way to do this, I don't know if anyone's got any ideas, but would be to get some very focused questions put in Parliament by a helpful MP, and see if we could get definitive answers from ministers.
The furloughing in the run-up to redundancy, I don't know the question, I don't know the answer to the question, but I believe I have it somewhere that I can't immediately check up. Can I get back to you on this, Paul?
Absolutely, yeah, it'd be great if you, yeah.
I think within the NUJ, within the officials, we've had a lot of information circulated about this, and I think it's somewhere that's been addressed. So it may be a question that we're able to answer short of a parliamentary question. You're exactly right that this scheme was introduced without a thought of exactly how it was going to fit into the framework of laws, and companies have been, well, we deal with enough employers who are cynical in their everyday employment, and we can't help but wonder whether they're doing the same when they're entering into the furlough scheme, and whether this is a genuine thing or whether they are simply trying to replace lost revenue with government cash. So right, so on the second question, I'll try and get back to you, Paul, probably later on this afternoon.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks very much, Nick and Paul. If anybody else wants to ask a question, or if anybody indeed knows the answer to the question that Paul has asked, I think Laura's going next. Would you like to do your briefing, Laura? And you may actually have the answer to that question. I don't know.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm sure colleagues are looking it up as we speak, and if we can get the answer before the end of the call, then we'll share it with people. Yeah, I mean, I think the points that Nick and Fiona made are really good points, and essentially the summary is get as organised and as genned up as you can before it happens, because that will stand you in good stead. So the things that I'm sure all of you are doing as reps at the moment in terms of communicating with members, having regular discussions, making sure you are up to date, making sure that you have personal email addresses for people, just having that communication channel is all really important, because you don't want to be worrying about those things when announcements are coming. I think because of the way which people are working at the moment, it's even more important just to have those connections with people. So if you have members who are not well, or who are on maternity leave or on holiday, then think about that as well, and how you can be in touch with those members in the best way for them. And I think at the moment it is an isolating experience for everybody. Also, we need to be taking extra steps to make sure finding about what may be coming down the line. And also, I think just what support with management now as well. They don't have to wait. These things can be put in place, because any processes, but particularly a redundancy process, can be very stressful for people. And I think managements have a responsibility, particularly at the moment with the challenges in the way that people are working and the isolation that people are experiencing, to think about that and to make sure that anything that they are doing properly takes account of that. Again, I'm sure that Adam will tell us that these are health and safety issues, and the any changes in the workplace need to be looked at, risk assessed and thought through properly in terms of their impact on people. I do think spending that extra time getting to know your member's situation is really helpful, because no doubt people are thinking about their careers, they're thinking about what they want to do, they're thinking about whether they want to work in offices, whether they want to work at home, whether they want to work part-time, you know, what they want to do. And having some understanding of that is helpful, I think, when it comes to any processes, and then just having that relationship with your members, because the critical in a situation like this is that you want things to be done on a voluntary basis, and so information and knowledge that you have is helpful in terms of thinking about that and getting to good outcomes. I think Nick talked about just making sure that you
got 1 minute, Laura,
have read the
please.
company policy, if they have one around redundancy and redeployment. That's a really important thing that we mustn't forget either, thinking about how people could be redeployed into other jobs or job sharing, what new jobs may be created. These are all things that can be thought about in advance. And also just getting your sources of information in place. So have a look at ACAS, for example, have a look at the government website. These things set out quite helpfully and clearly. It's sometimes a bit simplistically what you can expect from processes. Thanks, Caroline. And then, you know, I think don't let it all as individual reps. It's good to think now, what can you be putting in place in terms of having a bit of a committee of people perhaps to work on some of these things, and also what your communication channels will be. For example, perhaps you might like to think about setting up a sort of central email address which people could email into and answers could come back from, so that it's not all coming at one person in a great rush. because it will be too much to manage. So thinking how you kind of share out that work between a small committee, I think would be sensible. I'll stop there. I think broadband's not brilliant. Apologies if you didn't get all of it.
Thanks so much, Laura. We did miss bits of it, but I think most of us picked up the key things of what you were saying. Really important points you've made here, particularly around trying to develop a committee in a central place of being able to gather information. I have tried to note down as much as you've said as well, so I will summarise that and send it out. So if you think there's anything missing from that, Laura, I'll come back to you, because there was a lot of cutting out, and I know some people struggled more than others with that, but thank you so much for that. Would anybody like to ask a question or make a comment about anything that Laura said? Adam will come back at the end to talk a little bit about health and safety after the officials have finished their briefings. I can't see anybody else indicating, but please do tell me if I can't see you waving your hands. Nobody indicating? Oh, Duncan, please, Duncan, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just particularly with the emphasis on, you know, mental health in the workplace. Obviously, as a few people have said, people are quite anxious right now. We're in a situation at ITB. We've been told nobody's been asked to prepare for any redundancies, but I still think that it would be worth making sure we're prepared just in case that changes in the future. Is there any way you could recommend trying to broach this subject with members that's not going to just make people very scared? Because I think I don't want to sort of like be like a prophet of doom for people, but by the same token, I don't think it hurts to be prepared for this subject.
Thank you. That's a really important point, Duncan. And actually, we're going to be asking Paul Seagate to talk next. So maybe Paul, if you could address that point, if you don't mind. I know, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here. And if you want to come back to it later, that's absolutely fine. But I'll leave it to you.
No problem. No, I'll kick off by trying to answer that question. I mean, I live in Norfolk, which normally on these calls I have the worst broadband of anyone, so fingers crossed we'll get through the next 5 minutes with Norfolk broadband. I mean, the answer to that question is really, I think, you know, no matter what companies are saying at this time, I think we have to, I think most people are realising that there's some really tough times ahead, and I think people would be quite naive to not to think that redundancies are going to be on the agenda going forward. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to say to members that, you know, despite what ITB are saying and a lot of companies are saying, there's clearly going to be financial savings that need to be made, and we should prepare for the worst. I think that's an acceptable thing to say to the membership. But as far as redundancy in general, I mean, the key thing that people that have spoken before me seem to be saying is that preparation is key, and I absolutely agree with that. And I would like to give a little plug to this book. I don't know if you can see it on my screen, but it's Redundancy Law, a book put together by the Labour Research Department group, who do a whole range of books. But this one on redundancy law is particularly good. It's not great value for money because it's £10.80 and it's only 72 pages long, but it will be the best £10.80 you've ever spent, because it will have answers to most of the questions you might have. So I would certainly recommend, in terms of preparation, go out and buy this ahead of redundancies that might be coming to your workplace. I mean, there's obviously nothing good about redundancies, but if we're trying to find one positive, it will be that the threat of redundancies is a great recruitment tool. You know, if you're in a workplace at the moment which is facing potential cuts, which means any workplace, then you've got to be pretty silly not to be in a trade union. So I think we need to use this time to try and recruit as many people as possible, and that shouldn't just be down to the reps. It shouldn't be up to the reps to go and recruit more members. It should be up to the current members as well. And the biggest reason given by non-members on why they're not in a trade union, the biggest reason they give is that no one asked them to join a trade union. It's as simple as that. So, you know, if we ask our members to go out and try and recruit one member each, that means we double the size of chapels overnight. It's that simple. Recruit one member each, we double our size. So use this, I think, this time, you know, as we're sort of the phony war leading up to what we think is going to be a tough time for redundancies, use that time to go out and recruit. And as already has been said, make sure that you're familiar with your house agreements on redundancies. Make sure that you understand that, the length of consultation, that kind of thing. It's all useful information to know. And also, you know, the key thing is that when there are redundancies, companies have to consult, and they have to consult meaningfully. So that doesn't mean that they tell you that they're going to make redundancies and they're going to consult, and then in 30 days time say that's it, the consultation period is over. That's not how it works. It has to be meaningful consultation. They have to listen to our alternative proposals as an alternative to redundancies. So that might well be that, you know, we propose more job sharing, or we propose more part-time working, or we propose that, you know, the workforce takes a pay cut rather than make staff redundant, or we might propose that we get rid of a few bosses rather than journalists. And they have to, you know, companies have to take that seriously. They have to consider it. They can't just dismiss it out of hand. And there are plenty of instances when we have proposed things which companies have taken on board, and it has led put forward alternative ideas. Also, in the run up to redundancies, you might want to propose that there is a recruitment freeze, because what's the point in recruiting new people if in a month, 2 months, 3 months time there's going to be a range of redundancies? So it might be something you want to consider about a recruitment freeze. And certainly when we have got people facing redundancies, that's certainly something you probably want to push for, a recruitment freeze, which will make it easier in theory for people who are at risk to find redeployment within the company. Another thing to think about is trawling for volunteers for redundancy. In a lot of companies, you know, in big companies like the BBC, there are often more people wanting to leave than the company actually wants to make redundant. I mean, COVID-19 may change all that, because it's not a good time to be taking redundancy. But because I think partly because the BBC redundancy terms are fairly generous, there's always lots of people that are willing to take voluntary redundancy. So that might want to be something that you consider, and that can open up the door for something called bumping, which is where you've got someone that isn't at risk of redundancy but would happily be made redundant. They can be slotted into the role of someone that doesn't want to take redundancy but is at risk. So that's something worth considering. And another thing that you might want to think about is the size of the redundancy pool. So how many people actually in the pool are going to be at risk? And you know, you might want to reduce the size of the pool to put fewer people at risk, but sometimes actually having a bigger pool might be advantageous, because that might mean that if you have a bigger pool, there's more chance of finding volunteers. So that might be something that you know, can then mitigate compulsory redundancies. So that's another thing to think about. But you know, it'd be naive to think that there aren't going to be some people who are eventually made redundant, and when they are at risk of redundancy, it's worth bearing in mind that they are entitled to have time off for training, time off for interviews for other jobs, and that's if they've worked for the company for 2 years or more. So again, that's something that some companies are resistant to, because they don't want, although they're making the person redundant, they don't want them disappearing to go off and have training and job interviews. But the law says that actually they must be given time off to go and do that. And also, if people are offered an alternative job within the company, it's worth pointing out that they are, by law, entitled to a trial period. So if it's a role that's different from their current role, they are entitled to a trial. So they can try it for a month to see if it's something that they think that they're going to be happy with, if they've got the right skills for it. And then at the end of that month, if it's a job that they feel isn't right for them, they are entitled still to have redundancy. So that's something worth bearing in mind. But as I say, it's all in the book that I plugged at the beginning. I haven't got shares in it, I haven't written it, but it is worth going out and buying it. That's it from me.
That's brilliant, Paul. Thank you very much, and thank you for addressing the question that Duncan raised as well. Sorry for putting you on the spot there, but I too have got this redundancy book, and any of you that have done any of the trade union training courses with me will know, apart from me banging on about health and safety all the time, I also bang on about the Labour Research Department booklets. They are absolutely brilliant. They are written by lawyers, solicitors, but they are written in lay speak, so anybody can read them from cover to cover. I've put the links down the side in the chat as well for the Labour Research Department booklets. And I've also put a link to the ACAS. ACAS also provides some codes of practice on redundancy as well that are really good. They are written from an employer's perspective, but nonetheless we need to know what advice employers are being given so we can ensure that employers are doing what they're supposed to be doing, because that after all is what this redundancy stuff is all about. Fiona has also very kindly put up the password there. The NUJ is affiliated and is a supporter of the Labour Research Department, which is a charity that provides information, booklets, all sorts of information to people who affiliate to them, so trade unions that affiliate to them and members. So you can affiliate as a member. So if those of you that are looking for a birthday present and you're struggling, put yourself one of these down, say you want to get a subscription, because they really are invaluable. Also branches, some branches do actually get a subscription to these as well. Then you can access those resources directly. So thank you very much, Paul, for that. That's some more information that's come out here. Again, I shall summarise it all for you. Anybody got any questions or comments, or want to ask something, or want to share something at this point? We've still got a couple. Yeah, who's that?
It's Natalie. I've got a quick question. I'm actually a freelancer, but I know I just hello. I'm assuming, as we all expect, like a lot of places will be, are expecting redundancies, which is always a good trigger for people to not realise that it would have been beneficial to join a union anyway. But I'm assuming, sorry, that's a bit rude of me, sorry. I'm assuming that the union is actually open to people joining. I know it's not ideal, but if they're in a case of crisis, are we going to be accepting people or not? I know I joined when PA was going through teletext redundancies about 12, 15 years ago, but I did stay a member.
Thank you, Natalie. Would any of the officials like to answer that question? Is that Fiona that you've indicated?
I can. I mean, I think at times like this, I'm really advocating the use of discretion on this, and look at the circumstances. If you're a rep in a really well organised chapel, and you've been recognised for years, and you've been round there, and you've been asking people to join, and you've been doing everything you can, and people have been just refusing, then clearly if they then rock up and have a sort of deathbed conversion moment, then you might want to think twice about that, just in terms of the members who have been paying their subs in all these years. But having said that, there's some places where there are difficult to reach members, and people have maybe someone who's brand new to the company or something, you just haven't got around to talking to them yet, they don't even know that the NUJ's there. So I think just use your discretion. I mean, this is about talking to people and helping them and trying to convince them why they should join and stay in membership. And so if we can approach with that mindset, not in terms of people who just want to take advantage. And I think just bearing in mind that when you join, there's a limit to the help that we can give, and it is very much at our discretion. For example, people won't be able to have access to our solicitor's advice in the first 3 months of membership. So I think just I don't want to be computer says no about it, but I think just be a bit careful and think of the politics in your own chapel when it comes to these sort of cases.
My example, my thinking would be maybe something like the example in which I joined. Like I said, I'm freelance, so it doesn't actually kind of apply to me at the moment, but when I joined, it was when PA used to have the teletext contract, and the teletext contract went, and I know there was a bit of a recruitment drive, and a lot of us joined then, stayed. If that situation happened again, or a similar situation particularly in an where the union was unrecognised, would you be actively, I'm assuming you would. I think a lot of people in certain workspaces are probably likely to, oh god, what's the term? If they've been there for 10 years, it might take something like this for them to join. Would you be willing to consider them? By what you were saying, it seemed you would be.
I mean, most of the workplaces that are on my patch are unrecognised, so I take a particular view, and
okay.
I'll speak myself on that.
Okay,
really.
thank you.
I think we've got to try and be realistic and sympathetic, and if there's places that the union hasn't got to,
Yeah.
That's not entirely the non-members' fault. A little bit of that is on us as well, isn't it? So I think I just approach it in that way.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you. Nick has also raised his hand. Nick,
Yeah, I would largely back up what Fiona said. Yeah, in the Scottish office, we take a pragmatic view of it. We tend not to be sympathetic with people who have the Damascus conversion to trade unions on the day that they get the letter for a meeting for gross misconduct. And you know, we are obviously bound by the rule book with what we can do and how we can do it. The situation I'm thinking of is a workplace where we're trying to organise in Scotland, where we're pushing heavily and we're trying to get the message out. You know, there has to be, I think there has to come a point where people can't just join at the last minute, because it's the message that sends to people who have been in the chapel for 20, 30 years is, why did I bother? I could have just joined at the point where things were starting to go wrong. So we've tended to take a pragmatic approach. On the past, we've also talked to fathers of chapel, mother of chapel, and where we felt there were cases that are borderline, and we've been led by those. But if this, I'll still remember the point, if people aren't going to join the union at this point, you know, it's hard to see when they would be persuaded.
Thanks very much, Nick. And I think on that point as well, if anybody else has got any questions about this, sometimes it's got to be done on a case-by-case basis. So if in doubt about whether somebody can join, it's always important to speak to your officials about this and ask them for guidance on this, because you know, there are obviously different aspects of this that have been highlighted already. So thanks very much for that. Anybody else want to raise a question or ask anything before Andy comes in? I can't see any hands up. Okay, Andy, would you mind doing your...
I haven't got my hand up. Sorry, I've only...
Oh, sorry, Pia. Do you want to go ahead, Pia?
Yeah, sorry, I missed the top of this because this sounds awful, but I've got a huge homeschooling crisis. So I missed the first hour, and I was just wondering if this is going to be recorded.
Yes, all going to be recorded, and the link will be up on the NUJ website either later on today or tomorrow.
Amazing, thank you.
Okay,
I might just skip out again then and have a look at the recording later when I can. If
that's fine, Pia. And if you have any questions, just put them on chat before you leave. We can always raise them for you.
Bye-bye.
If you have any questions, Pia, just pop them on the chat and I can always raise them for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Andy,
thank
Andy,
you.
would you like to go ahead?
Will do, thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. We are struggling today. Your signal is also going in and out, and historically mine has struggled, so apologies if I'm only adding to the poor communication. Covered an awful lot of stuff, and coming at the back end, probably the best I can do is just pull together maybe a few extra to think about. Hopefully, if you remember some of it, when it comes down to proverbial hitting the fan, some of it will have stuck. That's the advice, not the proverbial. But redundancy is a complex process, and one of the important things to remember is that you don't have to deal with all at once. You have to start the process and talk to members and go through that process together. I'll just pop up in the chat a flow chart that recently came out from ACAS. Don't need to look at it now, but I would just chime with what Caroline said, which is that ACAS advice is aimed very much at employers. I think on this flowchart, trade unions are mentioned in one bottom corner. Don't be worried by that. You can wade in anytime you want during the process and as often as you want. In terms of that process, a lot of your members will want to know everything about how it affects them from start to finish, right at the beginning of that process. And don't be afraid to say, no, right now we need to concentrate on the initial parts of the redundancy process, which are not about how it affects individuals at the end. It's about whether we can save jobs. It's about how we can save jobs, how many jobs we can save. And that's about understanding the process, understanding the proposals, not about how they affect individuals, but how they affect your whole workforce. And that is as important for those who are staying as for those that are at risk. Because as a mother for a chapel, you are going to have to be dealing with the workload issues that you're going to be left with after the redundancy processes. Others have said, I would only reinforce, at this stage it's about communication and getting your comms sorted now. If you know how to speak to your members now, you will know how to speak to your members when you need to. Do have copies of your contracts, your agreements, your policies. It's increasingly difficult with being remote work. I wonder how many people are looking now and thinking, oh, where is my contract? And thinking, I know where it is, it's on a computer at work. Contracts don't tend to be generally very useful when it comes to redundancies. Most employers don't tend to write down very much, and most people don't tend to go into jobs thinking, oh, I wonder what I'm going to get when I'm leaving. But nonetheless, it's important to have it. Other than that, I'll just come back briefly to what Paul was raising about the issue of furlough and redundancy and notice. One of the problems, was to why you won't, one of the additional problems as to why you won't get a straight answer from a politician, law, and law is about being tested. So at this stage, what you will get is opinion. Now, I read some opinion quite early on in the process that suggested that because furlough was an alternative to redundancy, employers shouldn't be making people redundant while that alternative existed. But I was a bit wishful thinking, and I can't imagine that's going, well, it's probably not been tested in law yet, but it's the sort of thing where what government was very clear about was that should be considered as an alternative, and they can consider anything they like and then dismiss it, frankly. I spoke to Charlotte at Thompson's about this on Friday with regard to a case that I'm dealing with right now, and her advice, and obviously advice is only that until it's tested, was that it is perfectly possible for somebody who has been made redundant through a fair process for their notice period to be during their furlough, so that obviously this is an issue that isn't going to be lasting for very much longer. But yes, if your notice period, if it's a choice between a company paying you in lieu of notice or putting you on notice during your furlough, then it seems pretty much a no-brainer that they would save money by putting you on the furlough or keeping you on the furlough. My understanding is that as of tomorrow, if you've not been put on a furlough, you're not going to be eligible for the new furlough scheme. So presumably this isn't going to be something that we're going to need to worry about for very much longer. On that, I think that's probably in, sorry, it was a bit scattergun and it raised lots, but I think that's probably, thanks, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Andy. You've raised some more points, some really important points here, which I will try and summarise the best I possibly can after this and put it out there, particularly around the flow chart I think was really interesting that you put up there. Thank you very much for that. I think that's going to be interesting, but also the important part of trying to focus on the process that needs to be dealt with at that moment in time, I think is important, because as reps you're going to be dealing with a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry from a lot of your members who are going to want to know the whole thing. What's going to happen to them? What are the outcomes going to be? A lot of those questions you're not going to be able to answer, and it's important to try and encourage members to focus on the bits that you can do some work on and that hopefully you can actually get some success from, particularly picking up on the point that Paul made, which is about actually proposing alternatives, proposing options, and doing things in a different way. Might be, there might be a possibility that you may be in a position to be able to do that. So thank you very much for that, Andy. Would anybody like to ask a question, make a comment, share an experience at this point? Okay, I don't see any hands up. I think John Toner is here. I'm sure I saw
Bruce is interesting.
Hello, sorry, yes, Bruce here from the Racing Post. Could just make a comment.
Bruce. Please go ahead.
Hi, Caroline. Yeah, just a very quick update. Racing Post, we are imminently having redundancy consultation. And just one quick thing before I get to ask Andy, just passing on to you for information, the company have just agreed to pay in this month's furloughed pay the 4 bank holidays we've had since, so including Easter, VE Day and May Day, which we found quite interesting. They're going to do that on full pay on their sort of like legal advice. So I wonder whether that might affect, being sort of paying notice on furlough, whether we could argue about having that on full pay as well, obviously. And what you've just said also worries me, because obviously furlough is going to narrow down to 60% or whatever in coming months. So that would affect, the cynical companies will use that to say, yeah, we'll pay you furlough now, we're down to 60% or whatever. So it's going to affect members much, much more, if that scenario develops and plays out. I'd like to just, give the Racing Post of scenario at the moment is we've been lucky in the sense of having weekly meetings, the NUJ reps with the management, throughout the furlough, which has been very helpful. Mel's all on this. My fellow colleague Mel, my joint FOC, might have something extra to say, but we probably left it very late to really challenge them hard about, because they cut the sort of pay of the sort of people both working, there's 30 kept on, and they were cut to 50%, obviously, which certainly energised the chapel, which was brilliant. And we've got quite a few extra members through this. Without recruiting, they've come straight to us. A lot of the younger staff have been with us for about 2 years, which was good as well. We have obviously tried to recruit as well, and that's going well. But the company liaising with us finally actually came good with a financial update why they could only pay 50%. And last week, after sort of toing and froing, they've while saying they were going to review at the end of July, they've now said from June the 1st they will pay those that are working full pay. We're still on at them about the furlough. Why should the ones on furlough still, who are technically still sort of like employees of the company, why shouldn't they get the 100% as well? And now going into the redundancy process, obviously people still on furlough are exceedingly worried that they are now most at risk, which we try and sort of allay those fears. The company have sort of done the unfurloughing in 3 waves. Well, that's how they announced it. They've done 2 of them so far, 1 to come. And, they're still sort of predicating everything on the financial situation, obviously. And obviously we're going to challenge that through. And today's meeting's been very helpful about sort of things to challenge them on. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Bruce, for that. And it's really good to hear what you're doing. And obviously we're all really sorry to hear what's happening as well, because there are a lot of obviously very anxious members and very worried members there. I think you made a really important point about challenging.
Thank you.
How important it is to challenge, I think, was a really important point you made. I don't know whether Mel wanted to add anything to that, Bruce, because Mel, you're on the meeting as well. Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mel.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. I was just going to say a couple of things. First of all, I mean, the divisive nature in which they've paid the working staff is divisive in as much that it's a significant victory for Chapel Pressure, but those people that remain on furlough are, you know, still on furlough money. So the question we'll be asking the company is, why can't you dip into your pocket and not be divisive and pay it everybody? But it is a victory for the chapel, even so, what we've got out of them. But just a question I've got, which is the key question we have going forward, I think, is to try and get the company to be more transparent and honest about the state of the finances there, which is opaque. You know, it may be that genuinely they are in the situation that they say they're in. I mean, they're a racing paper that had no racing for 10 weeks, so we get that there will be issues, but even so, many members are already questioning the depiction the company are presenting of the finances, and that obviously is key because that underpins the whole redundancy process. And the other thing is that I would say is just, I did email Andy and Laura earlier, and Laura helpfully already got back to me on this, so but I will just quickly mention it, which is my limited knowledge of case law is that the situation where there is a precedent for paying enhanced terms, it's useful if there's any sort of precedent for that. Now, from what I understand, we haven't got enough racing post past cases to sort of present a strong narrative saying that was always the case, but we have got some communication saying they do pay enhanced terms. So we need to investigate about that key point as well.
Thank you. I think you've just demonstrated, thank you so much, Mel and Bruce, the importance of interrogation, really doing your research, asking the questions, pushing back all the time, challenging, not accepting what the employers are saying to you. Andy, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a reiterate something that I think all the officials have touched on, which is that at the start of the redundancy process, there is the business of who is at risk, and that this is something that there should be a transparent process that demonstrates who is at risk of redundancy and what there should be a link, explicit furlough, because clearly does know the process in most employers as to who was to put on. They were simply chosen and they were told and there are clearly, for instance, the entire sports staff were on furlough and it comes round to redundancies and redundancies in sport, then clearly there is going to be a link between furlough and the redundancies, but there should be nowhere where the reason for the being in a pool considered for redundance is simply they were on. If you have other members of your team who were not on furlough or doing the same sort of work, in pool, which is there should be a link between furlough and redundancy. I think just to say to Melon, you know, work, and given the size of their chapel and the opportunity this organic has raised in terms of ability to chat.
Andy, I'm really sorry. I don't know about everybody else, but I missed almost everything you said there, and I caught some key words, and I think what you said was really important. I'm really sorry to ask you, but would you be able to just do a quick summary for me, just to write a summary down of what you just specifically said, because I think people are going to really want to know what you've said. And if you could email it to me, I'll incorporate it into the main summary of the webinar, if you don't mind, because I don't know about anybody else, but I missed almost everything apart from a few keywords. Sorry to give you extra work, Andy. Brian Williams, would you like to come in here? Brian, would you like to come in? Can you hear me, Brian? I can see your hand.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. It is, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah, please, go ahead.
Me? Right, the thought that struck me about furloughs. Now, if the employers are going to misuse them in the way that they have, and I think it is a misuse, then what's good for them potentially could be good for us. Now, what I'm going to suggest here may apply more readily to individual redundancies than to collective. But the employers are doing it because obviously they are saving money. They are getting the government to fund some of their redundancy obligations. Now, with the back of a fag packet calculation, it's quite easy to work that out what that is. And I think there's a negotiating point, and it's one that I've started to use, is that if you're saving X amount, then our member, as part of their redundancy settlement, gets half X or 2/3 X or some of that money. It creates a sum of money that is then up for negotiation, as far as I see it. Now, I appreciate if you're dealing with 50 members or 100 members, you probably need a bigger fag packet to do the sums, but the principle, nevertheless, I think still applies.
Brian, that was really useful. Thank you very much. Any more tips? Anything else you've got that you've been involved in? Because I know you're doing a lot of negotiating. You've got a lot of experience as well as a negotiator. Please do share them on chat. If you want to email them to me so that I can share them with the rest of the group. This is really good stuff. Thank you very much. Really important points. Anybody else like to say anything? I think we've got one more official here. John Toner, I think, is here. I don't know whether he's still here or whether he's gone. You there, John? No, I think John Toner's gone. So anybody else like to share anything now? Because all the officials have kind of gone through the briefings that they wanted to say. The rest of this is for you now to share your experiences, ask any questions, make any comments. It's over to you now, really.
Carolyn, can I just come back one final question?
Of course, Bruce, yeah.
Yeah, it's just we found out that the management have made this comment to us this week that the company's workforce is 450-ish, so like whatever, and effectively the editorial unit, it's not the NUJ membership, but the editorial unit is 1/3 of that. So obviously we're going to, and the redundancies are going to be across the board through the company. So my question is just, what would you suggest as officials, that the way we handle that? We're not sure if any of the other people in the company, might be members of Unite or in another union, whether we should liaise with them on, put out feelers to them, and so what would be the recommendations how to handle that, sort of like having to sort of like deal with us of company wide, and then do the best for our members.
Thanks, Bruce. An important point. I'm going to ask an official that's got good broadband reply to this, because an official that's got good. Laura, do you want to reply?
Well, I don't think I count in the category of good broadband, so I will try, but if you can't hear me, I apologise. I mean, just to say what they will need to do, if the numbers justify it, Bruce, is to elect employee reps for the other parts of the business. And obviously the editorial part of the business will be represented by the NUJ. Once those reps are elected, you will then know who those individuals are. And I never think there is harm in being in touch with other individuals who may have common points to raise, because it can help to bring pressure onto the company. I think you'll also need to know from the company how they intend to deal with the processes. So we've seen examples where the company has had separate meetings, and some where companies have had joint meetings across the reps. You'll have to think as a chapel about what you think the most effective approach to that will be, and to know from the company what their proposals are, which obviously, as has been said, are subject to consultation.
Thank you, Laura. We got all that. Perfect. Thank you so much. Bruce, did you want to come back on that, or are you satisfied with the response you got?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
No, that's very helpful. And I think you know that is the point, that so we need to get what the proposals are from the company about, you know, where, you know, what, whether it's across the board or whether editorial being picked on or whatever. Yeah. So thanks a lot for that.
Brilliant. Anybody else like to make a comment? This is your time. Oh, sorry, Brian, you've got your hand up again. Would you like to go?
Please. Yeah, it's just to follow on from the point about representation now, and this may apply again more to people who are doing individual representations through redundancy. But if we're not recognised and collective redundancy rules apply over 20, and the company asks for employee reps to join a consultation process, if we've got a member involved in that, advise them as strongly as you can, I would say, to get on to one of those consultation groups with the understanding that we'll talk them through it. We'll be kind of flying the plane for them effectively, but get them on there, and get also into Unite and talk to Unite and other relevant union officials, particularly where they maybe are stronger than we are. I mean, in certain areas like press and PR, for example, we may just have one or two people in a workplace where Unite has got hundreds. So I personally have no pride when it comes to talking to Unite. I'm happy to piggyback on them if it gets a better deal for our guys.
Really good advice. Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to say something? Okay, I can't see anybody else's hands up. Okay, well, we've kind of come to the end then. I think if nobody wants to say anything else or offer anything, share an opinion, we will be doing another one of these in 2 weeks' time. We may well be doing another one of these around this particular topic as well, because I think this topic is going to become, sadly, one that is needed more than any other. Adam, would you like to just come back and say something briefly in response to something that Laura raised earlier on?
Yeah, the quick one, there are health and safety implications of regarding redundancy and around it. I've posted the PDF of the notes that the Health and Safety Committee produced to the chat on the right. I don't know whether people can download it from there. I hope you can. And there are particular questions about risk assessing as far as the stress implications of workloads for those left behind. And having too few staff is in itself can be a safety risk and threaten people's mental health. So we shouldn't be at all afraid of using that route to try to protect jobs and to slow the redundancy process to keep people in work for at least a little longer. That note's there. If you haven't been able to download it, contact Caroline, give her more work, and we'll forward a copy to you. Yeah, and if you can get on one of the health and safety training courses, if you haven't done them, please do so as quickly as possible, and get as many chapel officers also to be health and safety reps. Notify the employer, because it gives you, if you are a rep, far more rights and protection than just being any other sort of rep. So do both. You don't actually have to do anything, but having the title of a health, safety and well-being rep does.
Thanks, Adam. I think we missed a little bit of that, but I think we got most of it. Thank you. That was really important. The other important thing to add to what Adam has said is that in an unrecognised workplace, health and safety reps also have rights. So if you are in an unrecognised workplace, you haven't got a chapel perhaps set up yet, if you elect somebody in the staff group who is an NUJ member to become a health and safety staff rep, you also have really important rights particularly around raising issues with an employer, asking for information, being involved in discussions and negotiations around health, safety and welfare. And almost every single issue that is being brought to you at the moment as a rep will have a health, safety and welfare and equality aspect to it. And in order to be able to address that, you need to know what your rights are. So as Adam has said, there are health and safety courses coming up. We've got one on Friday, which is full, but I will be sending out with this, there'll be the full dates of the other health and safety courses that are coming up. And there's a specific health and safety reps course for branch officers, which is taking place on the 30th of June. So for those of you that are working in branches and supporting individual members or members in unrecognised workplaces, that's the course for you to do. It's a 2-hour webinar on the 30th of June. Please do email me if you are interested in going on it. I think Emily, did Emily want to say something? Or maybe Emily's gone now. I think Emily's gone now. So a few people have had to leave the meeting because they've had to go back to work. Would anybody else like to say anything else? Make a comment, share an experience? Okay, well, thank you very much for taking part. I hope you found this webinar useful. Thank you to the officials. Mel, would you like to make a point?
Just quickly, just 3 quick questions. I don't want to elongate this unnecessarily, but just going back to the situation we're in, how could we, the first question is, how can we unpick the true finances of the company? That's the first question, because that obviously is absolutely integral to the whole rationale of redundancies. And the second question is, what are the rules with regards to us finding out who the other reps are? Because of course, as everyone's working remotely, we won't actually know unless the management tell us who the other reps are. So that's the second question. And the third and final question is that just looking to sort of offer as much as we can in terms of proper engagement with the company with regards the rationale behind who's picked for redundancy. Isn't there an equality impact angle to possibly pursue, particularly maybe with regards to age discrimination? I'm jumping the gun putting it like that because I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying, is it a question we could legitimately ask? That's it. That's the questions.
Thanks very much for those questions, Mel. Can I just clarify one point? The second question you asked for, the names of other reps, are those reps within the NUJ or reps from other unions? I'm presuming it's reps from other unions.
I don't think, I think where we are, there is minimal union involvement beyond the NUJ. I don't categorically know that. I know there was a Unite rep there with, I don't think they had anything like a sort of collective or chapel or whatever you want to call it. But I know a few years ago there was a Unite rep, and I don't even know if he's still there. I will investigate, but I suspect union coverage beyond editorial is minimal. So they will be elected or whatever the process is, but not unionised reps. There'll be staff reps to oversee this process.
Okay, thanks very much. Do one of the officials want to come back on this one? Because I know Andy and Laura are working with Mel. Do you want to take this out of the meeting and speak directly to Mel and Bruce after this? Because there are obviously quite specific questions that you may want to spend some time addressing. Would that be the best way of doing it, Laura?
Yeah, I think that would be sensible, Caroline. Yes, I do. Yeah.
I'm very conscious that this is being recorded, so I think some of these issues should be addressed kind of outside a general meeting, really. So Mel and Bruce, I hope that's okay with you. Laura and Andy will contact you directly about those issues. Adam, did you want to come back on something very quickly, because I'm just about to wrap up?
Yes, very quickly with that. If branches have got links with their local trades councils, or in your area, your NEC rep can tell you who's involved with the regional CUC. We've got good links with many other unions, and we can probably use that as a route to finding out where other reps are and who the best person to contact is. So there are ways of doing that.
Thanks, Adam. That's great. Really useful information there. So I want to thank everybody for taking part. We've now come to the end of this webinar. There will be another one in 2 weeks. The theme will be dependent on what members want the theme to be. So please give me your feedback. Do email me if there's anything you specifically want covered. Thank you very much for taking part. If you want to unmute yourselves, you're very welcome to now and say goodbye to each other. I will be in touch with the date of the next meeting to invite you all to that one. And as I say, any feedback, any comments you want to make directly to me, please do. Just email me. It's good to see you all. Take care, and I'll be in touch.